Hey everyone, I'm going to be discussing the 7 principles for making marriage work by John Gottman. And as part of preparing for our marriage convalidation through the Catholic Church, I was given this book by the priest at our local parish. Having been married to my wife for over 12 years, this felt like a somewhat unconventional assignment because typically I see books like this handed out to newlyweds or recently engaged couples gearing up for their journey ahead. But nonetheless, I decided to dive into it with an open mind, and I can say I'm glad I did. This book has a lot of knowledge behind it. So, the book itself packs a whole lot of research backed insights into what makes relationships thrive or falter. Drawing on extensive research and studies of thousands of couples, Gottman compiled a list of ideas that can help couples in their relationship. And what I'm going to do here is discuss what resonated with me the most, what I found practical, and I'll even talk about some areas that I disagree fundamentally with the author. And this is often through the lens of my own faith and personal experiences, but I thought I would share all of this in case it sparks helpful thoughts for anyone contemplating marriage, navigating its challenges, or simply looking to strengthen their relationship. From the outset, Gottman sets a compelling tone by asserting that he can predict with 90% accuracy whether a couple's relationship will last or not, based on just 15 minutes of interaction in his controlled lab setting. He monitored physiological indicators such as heart rate, blood pressure, and levels of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline during discussions about common marital flashpoints. An elevated reading suggests the body is entering fight or flight mode, which, if chronic, erodes emotional connection between the two. Gottman extends this impact on families, explaining how parental conflict can elevate stress hormones in children, and this can lead to a cascade of issues such as heightened anxiety, increased depression, behavioral outbursts, and even diminished academic performance. As a parent myself, it's a good reminder that marital health isn't just about the two of us, it also ripples out and affects our kids as well. Gottman dedicates space to dismantling widespread myths that plague relationship advice. And one prevalent misconception is that mastering communication techniques like active listening, people say that's the ultimate fix, but while that sounds good, Gottman's data reveals that it often falls short without addressing deeper underlying patterns. And another myth he talks about is the outdated notion that infidelity is predominantly a male behavior or problem. And drawing on evolving societal trends, he points out that as more women enter the workforce, the dynamics have shifted. And in fact, recent statistics indicate that among younger adults, women now report higher rates of affairs than men. This is often correlated to increased opportunities for external connections rather than inherent gender differences. And this challenges underlying stereotypes and underscores how external factors like career demands and social environments influence fidelity. Now, before unveiling his core framework, Gottman introduces the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which is a series of destructive behaviors that, if unchecked, foretell relational doom with alarming precision. The first of the 4 is criticism, and this goes beyond a straightforward complaint. For example, you forgot to take out the trash, and it morphs into a character assault of the person, like, you're so lazy and irresponsible. It attacks the person's core identity rather than the problem, and it fosters resentment for the spouse. The second horseman is contempt, and this is the most corrosive of the bunch. And contempt, it can involve sarcasm, eye rolling, or mocking, but it conveys a sense of moral superiority of one spouse over the other. It treats the spouse as an inferior or unworthy person, eroding their respect, and it often stems from and unresolved bitterness. The third of the horsemen is defensiveness. Now, in response to criticism, one might counterattack or play the victim. This shuts down any form of accountability and it often escalates the cycle and it prevents a genuine resolution of the problem. And the fourth and last one is stonewalling. And this is where one spouse emotionally withdraws, tuning out like a stone wall. And it could be perhaps staring blankly, changing the subject, or actually just physically leaving. And it's often used as a protective mechanism against being overwhelmed, but it leaves the other spouse feeling abandoned. And over time, it can permeate throughout the entire relationship. So, what amplifies the danger here is when these horsemen ride frequently, leading to what was termed emotional flooding. And this is a state of physiological overload where rational discussion becomes impossible. Gottman stresses that while every couple has arguments or disagreements, the real peril lies in the increased frequency of these arguments or disagreements. If negativity dominates, it rewrites the couple's shared history in a pessimistic light. And it would make what would be normally fond memories feel tainted and a future hope feel dim. So amid these warnings, one concept leaped out to me as particularly transformative, and that was repair attempts. Now, what repair attempts are deliberate and often subtle interventions during heated moments to try and dial down tension and reconnect. They don't require grand gestures, but they can be as simple as a playful wink or simply pausing and say, can we pause and just hug this out? Now, physiologically, what it does is it helps to lower agitation, preventing the dispute from hijacking the nervous system. And Gottman emphasizes that successful couples aren't those who avoid fights, but those who master their repairs, viewing them as signs of commitment rather than weakness. So with that foundation laid, Gottman unfolds his 7 principles for marital success, each one drawn from observing couples who maintained happiness over decades. What I'll do here is outline the 7 principles. However, I will say that the author goes into great detail on each one. So I highly recommend getting a copy and reading for yourself. And each section also has ways where you can evaluate how you and your spouse score in each of these areas. It can help you identify any potential strengths or weaknesses. And it also has activities you can try out to improve areas that could use a little work. So the first principle is to enhance your love map. A love map is a mental blueprint of your spouse's world, and it includes aspects such as their joys, fears, dreams, and daily stressors. It's about curiosity and how much you know about their life, such as their current work challenges, favorite childhood memories, or unspoken aspirations. Gottman argues that detailed love maps act as a buffer during tough times, fostering empathy for one another. And exercises include asking open-ended questions like, what's been weighing on your mind lately, to help keep the map updated. Second principle is to nurture fondness and admiration. This principle counters negativity by deliberately focusing on your spouse's positive attributes. It's about expressing genuine appreciation and thanking them for all the small acts. Gottman warns against the negative sentiment override, where flaws overshadow virtues. Little compliments and displaying gratitude, even for the small things, goes a long way. The third principle is to turn toward each other rather than away. This means you're actively trying to support one another and to support your spouse, while turning away from them would be ignoring them, and that would breed isolation. Gottman highlights how the seemingly mundane moments sustain bonds, And he critiques modern distractions like smartphones and social media, which can hijack attention from one another. The fourth principle is to let your spouse influence you. And it is important to bring your spouse in on major decisions, which shows them both esteem and love. Both spouses must honor and respect each other to allow for this influence. And at times, it is necessary to compromise to find common ground on big life decisions. This requires humility and demonstrating love through respect. The fifth principle is to solve your solvable problems. And not all conflicts are created equally, and some are solvable, whereas others may not be. Gottman has a 5-step process for solving these solvable problems. The first is to soften the startup. Second is to make and accept repair attempts. Third is to soothe yourself and the other spouse while you're going through this. Fourth is to compromise and find middle ground. And the fifth is to process and address any grievances so they no longer linger. Framing issues such as us versus the problem fosters unity. And when children enter the equation, it expands their needs as well and includes the we in the problem. The sixth principle is overcoming gridlock. And these are the perpetual problems that are in the not solvable category, such as clashing over money habits, tidiness, or even religious practices. Becoming gridlocked when they stall progress, and it's marked by repetitive arguments, humorless tension, polarization, and where compromise feels like a surrender. Gottman's antidote is to dig beneath the surface to uncover the hidden dreams of the spouse. Gottman suggests finding out what these hidden dreams are that the other person has that might be the source of conflict. And it's important to understand why this dream is so meaningful to your spouse and where it comes from. And perpetual problems can at least be smoothed over, and gridlock can be avoided by taking the author's approach. He recommends identifying the problem, soothing one another when talking about it, reaching areas of temporary compromise by identifying areas of flexibility, and ending by saying thank you to one another for attempting to work through it. Now, the seventh and last principle is to create shared meaning. Beyond daily logistics, this principle builds a deeper legacy centered around creating a family narrative infused with purpose. Gottman lays out 4 pillars for this. The first is to have rituals of connection, such as a shared family meal. The second is mutual support for roles where each spouse is on the same page philosophically what those roles should be. The third is shared goals. And fourth is common symbols and values which influence decisions and actions. This might be religious in nature. Gottman concludes optimistically and offers advice that monumental overhauls aren't necessary. Instead, he promotes consistent and gentle tweaks, like incorporating repair attempts, which can yield exponential benefits over time. Now, while I found this book immensely valuable for its evidence-based approach, and it offers tools that are practical and actionable, I do have some disagreements, and no book is going to be in complete agreement with all readers. There are several elements in the book that clash with my own worldview. And first is Gottman's repeated assertion that reality is relative. And this just struck a discordant note with me. While he may have intended this as a nod to subjective perceptions, such as how each spouse interprets events differently, it hints at and reflects postmodern relativism. And fundamentally, postmodern relativism denies objective truth. Now, as a Catholic, I hold that reality is objective and absolute, that it's knowable through reason and revelation. and it is best aligned with Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life, and syncing our perceptions to this truth rather than validating all viewpoints as equal promotes genuine harmony with God the Creator. And this ties into my second critique, which is an overemphasis on emotions at the expense of reason. Now, conflict resolution often prioritizes validating feelings to de-escalate, at least in our modern times. This is inadvertently favoring the more emotive spouse while pressuring the logical one to concede. And it's not that emotions are not important as they reveal inner states, but if they're unchecked, they lead to chaotic volatility. And a balanced approach incorporating rational discourse and self-mastery, in my opinion, would be more appropriate. Dismissing reason risks excusing poor behavior under the guise of someone being emotionally authentic. Now, finally, the book's laser focus on conflict physiology and transactional fixes neglects a major physiological elephant in the room that is being ignored. And that's raw physical attraction. That's what likely led to the relationship to start in the first place. What ignites relationships, that spark, desire, chemistry, and intimacy, that deserves equal attention. And Gottman's lab measures stress during conflicts, but it ignores the biology and physiology of attraction. And this emotion feels like addressing only half the equation in relationships. And it's something that seems all too common in our contemporary modern discussion on relationships. Now, in summary, the 7 Principles is a worthwhile read for any stage of marriage. It blends science with practicality to foster enduring love in a relationship. And despite my disagreements, I would still recommend reading this book, just perhaps supplement with extra material. And if you're consider reading this or picking it up, it might just illuminate paths to deeper connection in your own relationship.